think it's almost like, are you a glasses half empty or half full person?
Yes.
You know, what is your mindset? Do you have a fixed mindset or do you have a growth mindset? And I think a growth mindset definitely promotes a more positive way of thinking.
True meaning of spirituality or understanding spirituality can only come from your own experiences.
Absolutely.
It cannot come from looking at someone and believing, yes, if that person is doing it right, so then the path is right.
You know, your mind is like a garden, and any weeds that appear are like your negative thoughts. So the image I have in my mind is that you've got to regularly remove those weeds. The negative thoughts will come, but you've got to keep removing them.
Hello and welcome to the Modern Day Spirituality Podcast by Manav Dharam, a podcast dedicated to those in search of spiritual thoughts and insights. We're going to continue speaking to different people from different corners of the world, sharing their thoughts and insights on spirituality. And I'm really glad to say today we've got Darshna and Akshay in the room with us. Welcome to the podcast, both.
Thanks, Kavi, and thanks for having us here.
No worries. Welcome on board, and we're looking forward to talking through with you many different aspects. But today we're talking all things positivity. So before we get to that, we always like to just have a bit of an introduction from both of you. So Darshna, if you can just introduce yourself, and same with you, Akshay.
Yeah, my name's Darshna, so I'm in my 40s, I'm a mum of 3 teenagers, I work in healthcare, I live up in the Peak District in England, enjoy reading, walking in the countryside.
Keeping busy with the kids.
Absolutely, yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome aboard. Akshay?
Well, thanks for having me here again. I'm Akshay Bhardwaj. I'm the head of business development for a global energy company based in London. Been here for 2.5 years, previously back in India.
Awesome.
And my hobbies are football. I'm a big football fan, and also, talking and reading about spiritual knowledge and understanding, how spirituality and the individual comes together in terms of their personality.
Thanks for coming on board. And like I said, we're talking all things positivity today, so lots to discuss there. I think we like to kick off and just sort of, from your perspectives both, when you think about positivity, what does it mean to you beyond obviously the standard cliche of stay positive, etc.? What does it bring up for you emotionally, spiritually, personally?
I think there's no perfect definition, and I believe there should not be any perfect definition because it's more individual in that sense. And that's what I keep on focusing, that how do I make myself more positive on a daily basis? And there are multiple things that happen in a day which can, make you like not feel positive. But I think that's wherein we talk about and we practice spirituality, because that keeps on helping us in terms of times of stress. And mainly, in our age, it's more to do with the professional lives. It's all encompassing. It takes you on a journey which is like 10 to 12 hours in a day. Unfortunately, that's the case, even though we do not want it. And then, you have to divide your time amongst the family, amongst your wife, and then, try to bring it all together. So that's where I feel. I feel positivity is about living in that moment, trying to understand what it all means and how do we make sense of all of that. And again, spirituality plays a big part in terms of who we are as a person.
Definitely, because where you're saying there, understanding what it means, I think that is probably the biggest barrier personally I've probably come up against, because it's about, like you say, how do you understand whether it's a positive or negative for you? Because there could be elements where it's a bit of a hazy space. Is it actually a positive for you? Or is it, like we've spoken in previous podcasts around materialism, things like that. So it could be a positive piece that supports that materialistic piece that you're working on. But at the same time, is that then bringing you away from your spirituality side of things? I don't know. It's just it's an interesting way of looking at things, I reckon.
Yeah. And I think we talk about it. We try to be positive. And there are, individual ways in which you try to be positive. For me, it could be doing something which I like, watching a football match could make me positive. Reading a book, again, as I said, my hobby is to read about spirituality and what it all means. So that could, make me positive again. or it could just be maybe a small discussion with my wife, just to say hello and just try to hear her voice. Or maybe it's your parents, because I live in UK. My parents are not here, so maybe you speak to them. So it could be anything, and I think that's where you can find pockets of happiness, pockets of positivity in your work life, and then just try to go with the flow. Because, like you said, Kavi, it's very hazy. A situation wherein I feel a bit negativity, or there is something which is keeping me down, could ultimately mean that it may be meaning for something else for the other person.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's about the
It's very
perspectives,
individual,
and yes,
isn't it?
it's very
Yeah.
perspectival, and I believe that's what you understand that.
Go on, sorry there.
Yeah,
I was going to say, on a superficial level, you can come across a lot of people. You have to be positive, say, on a professional level, where if I'm having a bad day, I've started off having a bad day at home, maybe it's been difficult getting the kids out of the house to get to school, then you've got to get to work, you've got a busy day ahead of you. So my background is healthcare. So when you're patient-facing, you can't bring any difficult impacts from your start of your day into your professional life. So you've got to have a positive facade, haven't you? And I think all of us are really good at masking a little bit, and we have to do that in our day-to-day lives to some degree.
yeah,
But then there's a difference between, I think, being positive because you're using it as a method of avoidance.
yeah,
So, for example, say somebody, falls over, hurts their leg really badly, but is really scared of hospital, doesn't want to go and have it checked out.
yeah,
And putting a positive spin on that and saying, no, it's fine, it's all going to be okay, it's all right. That sort of positivity that lasts for a day. And then the leg gets worse, and then it continues for a few days, and then an infection starts, and they're still going, no, it's fine, it's going to be okay. A couple of weeks later, and it's really bad now, purely because they've avoided facing what they're fearful of, so their positivity is masking a fear.
Yeah.
And I think where that sort of positivity is more of an avoidant aspect, whereas if you go a little bit deeper, what is actual positivity? When we're talking about, say, what Akshay was saying, you're into reading about spirituality, day-to-day simple aspects of positivity, and I think what does it mean to you for in your day-to-day life in simplistic terms, not superficially?
So we're talking, in that scenario, we're talking almost, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a scenario now, but a simplistic, you get something done that's a really basic task, but it creates that element of positivity for you because I've done something, I've ticked something off the list, or I've crossed something off my list. Yeah. That sort of is that what you're saying? It spurs you on to continue because it's it's not that superficial piece. It's just a simple task you've been able to get out and say, right, I'm going to stay positive the rest of the day. I've done the first 5 things on my list, and more to go.
Yeah, that's a perfect example, isn't it? I'm sure many of us wake up. I don't know about you, but I find to-do lists, I've got them coming out of my ears. And some days it's okay to just say, okay, I've got one thing done from my to-do list. That has been a positive day. Yeah. Rather than, oh my goodness, those 99 things on my to-do list I haven't done.
I think for me, it's really about making a balance, or finding a balance rather. That yes, there is a professional life, which obviously you need to fulfill on the commitments, on your tasks, and we are all working to deadlines, right, in a professional sense. So getting them done definitely gives you a high. But then are you then at a cost? Does it come at a cost wherein you are letting go of your happiness, which is just not related to the professional life, but also more on the personal side. And, like for example, if I have a super day at home, at office, but then I am not able to speak, or spend time with my family, then would I call it a fully positive day for me? The answer could be somewhere in between. And it could be the other way around as well, that even if I'm taking a holiday or I'm amongst my family, but then there are some tasks on the back of my mind, and I'm not able to fulfill that.
Yeah.
And then I'm somewhere in between. So that's why I said that, it's about maintaining that balance, keeping it, it's very individual. So nobody would, there's no recipe to it that, you have to do 1, 2, 3 steps, and then your life would be happy and you are being positive. Yeah. Because sometimes, and sometimes, you could be in a positive zone, but the team that is working around you or the colleagues might not be feeling the same way. And then it takes you down to at least think about all those things. And that's why, I have a habit that, whenever I wake up, every day when I wake up, so I try to do my normal chores in that sense, but I do spend at least 10 minutes, 15 minutes just to align my thoughts for the day, think about things that I want to do. I'll try to meditate just to give that positive start to my day, and maybe even if it's a one page from a book, which I follow Manav Dharam and from the teachings of Sadhguru Dev Shri Satpalji Maharaj. So for me, even if I read one page of that book, I think that just keeps me going for the day. Yeah. And it could be a simple quote that just I take with me to work and it stays there with me. Yeah. And then it keeps me giving that positivity throughout. So I think it's very individualistic, but but definitely because we are all working 24/7 domains wherein work is important. So I'm sure it's that same with you as well.
I think it's almost like, are you a glasses half empty or half full person?
Yes.
What is your mindset?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a fixed mindset or do you have a growth mindset?
Yeah.
Right.
And I think a growth mindset definitely promotes a more positive way of thinking.
Yeah. Agreed.
And I'll tell you of one small, it's a really simple example, but a small thing that I met up with a friend of mine quite recently, someone I used to work with actually. So years ago when I started learning how to drive, my mum used to take me out, to practice in the car. And we'd get to a car park and, finding car parking space. So I had that negative mindset of saying, oh gosh, the car park is really full, isn't it? We're never going to find a car parking space here. And, she said to me, don't think that way. Think when you enter the car park, you must think, I will find a parking space.
Yeah.
And I've done it every single time. And I'm telling you, it works.
It does. It does.
So I was telling my colleague about this. We were driving around for work. And she was having a similar type of day, and she was very much, we're never going to find a car parking space. So I said, hey, this is what my mum taught me, and it really does work. I said, why don't you try it?
Exactly.
So I hadn't met up with her for quite a few years, and I met her quite recently. Yeah. And one of the first things she said was, I still remember what you told me. What your mum says. I think about your mum every single time. Yeah. I want to find a car parking space. I think to myself, I will find one. And she said, you know what, Darshna, it works.
Yes.
So it's just keeping yourself in that headspace where you're like, this will be fine.
Totally.
Yeah. Easier said than done. Yeah.
And that's one small example.
Yeah.
Think if you could apply that to every aspect of your life,
where could you be?
How amazing would that be? I wish I could. Unfortunately, human nature is that it drags you back into a negative way of thinking.
And totally agree with that. I think that's where it is the most important part, because everybody would be positive on a certain day or a certain time, and then it does not, stay with them forever throughout the day. And that's the case with us all. But I totally agree with the fact that the example that you gave, that it's not about just thinking about in a more theoretical way, I'm going to be positive, because that does not happen.
It's practical.
You have to be in that moment, or try to be in that moment, wherein you can stay positive yourself first, and then try to bring everyone together, try to make that atmosphere around you also quite positive. And smaller things like, the example that you gave, I think that's perfect. That's how you not only create positivity in your head, but you create that atmosphere wherein the other person also feeds off that.
Yeah. Osmosis.
And you have to live it every day to learn it. There is no foolproof way, like I said earlier. And that's wherein we try to make things work.
And we focus there quite a bit on like how that positivity helps us. But how about we spin it slightly? So have there been times for both of you where you felt disconnected from that positivity and you can't be that positive? And at the same time, what's then sort of helped you say come back and realign and reconnect? Like, have you got any examples like that? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, for me, and it has happened, I mean, a lot of times that from the example that you gave initially, Kavi, that, work is important for us in this age, right, in which we are mid-professionals to going on to senior professional roles. So work is quite important, and it really drives you forward. And then, of course, relationships together. And sometimes it happens that, you had a bad day at work, but then you come back, you try to be positive. And how do you reclaim that moment? Basically, you have to disconnect from that, life of yours, which was in the office. And when you're coming back, there are people in the house or home who matter to you, and then you try to spend. So that's my perfect recipe, that how you come back from, say, a bad day at work. You try to spend some time disconnected. You speak to people who are more at a personalized level.
Yeah.
It could be anybody who you want to speak to. For me, it is more around doing the same what I've been doing. That watching some sports, maybe football, or if it's available, and then trying to be reading some books, trying to go online and trying to recollect my thoughts basically. So basically, going inside, trying to speak to oneself, and then trying to understand the larger picture, because again, it's very momentarily that you feel a certain feeling and then it goes away. So I think talking to oneself, and that's wherein again spirituality comes as a big way in terms of helping me work on that moment, trying to come back to positivity, to collect my thoughts, go inside, practice that meditation if possible, and then take it from there, basically. But there's no foolproof way, to be honest.
And I think just coming back, so from my perspective, if I think about it, it's easier for us to say to ourselves, stay positive.
Yeah.
So easy, right? But in reality, it's very difficult at times. You could be in such a negative mindset, or a mindset that's really downtrodden you. How do you come out of that? And to your point there, it's about, so when I listen to sports professionals, if you listen to the cricketers right now, they'll be in the middle of a match, but they'll be, say, in the dressing room, between innings. They will not be concentrating on cricket. They're trying to distract their mind away from that. So what they do is they'll be, I don't know, putting, like playing some golf or playing some cards or whatever. They try and do anything but be in that sort of moment, because of how stressful it is, because how difficult it is. So in the same way, I think, taking like your example, that you sort of switch your mind, but is that almost a way of, are we just pushing that negative day you've had to the side, or are we just masking it?
Not dealing
are we
with
masking it?
Yeah.
Should we be taking it head on and saying, what should I be doing to improve that? Because that's the way I think sometimes I'll look at it, is, if I had a bad day, analyze it as well. It's not, I don't think, sometimes I'm going to slightly disagree with what you said there, in terms of, speak to your family, great, that'll help you. But I think sometimes you have to then also tackle it head on and say, okay, why did I have that bad? What led to that, to me having the bad day? Oh, I woke up late. I didn't have my breakfast. So that way you can then almost flip it and change it into, how can I turn it into a positive?
I think it's noticing the emotion behind it. So whatever that negative experience is, it's being aware of whatever emotion you had attached to that bad day. Whether it was frustration, whether it was anger, whether it was sadness, jealousy. There's so many emotions that come within us in the course of a day. And it's understanding and recognising it, isn't it? I don't know if you'd agree with that, Akshay.
But it's understanding the underlying piece to that, right? Because if there's anger, what's the underlying anger coming from? It could be the stuff going on personally that you need to go and resolve. It could be stuff that's, you receive it happens all the time. You receive an email at work and you're like, why have I got that? It's like, why have I got that response? But it's how you then deal with that, which is the key aspect, right?
For me, again, I mean, so the positive side to things, or a negative connotation about a particular incident, is also related to what's going on in the larger context, right? So that's why I said that, and that's why I said that sometimes it's not about resolving things also, because I mean, you can't resolve
Sometimes you can't.
your
you can't.
manager.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah.
You can't resolve
You can't control
a bad
other
day.
people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And you have to live with them.
Even if you want to.
Yes, and that's where I came from.
Yeah,
that,
sure. No, that makes sense.
That the only way you can deal it, and trust me, and I guess again it's an example that everybody would have experienced, that if there is a situation and it's out of your control, so you have to just live with it for that moment.
Yeah.
And try to be,
Acceptance, isn't it?
try to be more reasonable or be more proactive, or however you want to change it. Perhaps the next day, because when you're in that heat of the moment,
It's very difficult.
your emotions are overpowering you already. So it might just lead you to take a wrong decision.
Exactly.
I mean, for example, if an email comes and it just talks about something which you do not like, maybe some extra work, or maybe you have to do something which is beyond your scope already.
Yeah.
It just really kills you, especially if it comes late in the evening.
That's
When
it,
you're already thinking about things you would do back home.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's a process, and we all have to deal with it. And that's why it's important that you let the other person know that perhaps, and this is what I do, this is my personal experience, that I'll tell the other person that, yes, this is important, but so is my time.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
is my personal time.
Yeah.
So this is important, will be done, but then please allow me some time, because if I start doing it right now,
You're
I
not
might
gonna
do a very bad job,
Yeah.
which may not be to your satisfaction.
Having
Boundaries, right?
yeah.
Exactly.
Took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that's only that's the way, having those boundaries allow you that space to have that positivity, have that negativity in the same space, but also resolve any conflict you may have internally as well as externally, I guess, in that sense.
And that's a motto that I've lived through with my life, that, and it's not like I'm perfect around it, but the idea is not to be too emotional about things you cannot control.
Yeah.
Because if you live in that moment, you get sucked into it, and then you do not know what might come out of that.
What spiritual teachings or experiences have sort of helped you anchor that sort of positivity for both of you, maybe?
So, coming back to what you asked earlier, have you had experiences where we've not been in particularly positive mindsets? And, I certainly have been through times in life where we've been to some, dark places, I would say. We've had, every family experiences different things. And we, in our family, we've unfortunately experienced the loss of people at young ages. Ask any couple in a relationship. Married life is not always straightforward and easy. When you've got a growing family, you've got your professional life. There are challenges every day. And so all these Instagram stories that we see that are very shiny don't paint that picture of reality, do we? And reality is very different.
Yeah.
So in these times, I didn't feel very positive at all. And certainly someone coming to me at that time and saying, well, just be positive, there is no way that would have worked for me, But I feel so fortunate and lucky that my grounding factor that got me through all those difficult times, and still does, is just being on this path of spirituality. So I have a guru called Satbalji Maharaj, and he has initiated me into spiritual knowledge. And what this involves is just understanding yourself, learning yourself, and learning how to tap in that pure essence of what I think of it as the true positivity. When you look inside yourself and just understand yourself that little bit better, it's almost like it's a grounding factor that just stabilizes you and keeps you going through life. So whatever stage in life you're at, those difficult times that I have had and probably will continue to have, this one thing I know is always there. It is a constant. It is a continuous source of energy within myself that I know I can tap into. And it's not going to be affected by, relationships. It's not going to be affected by work. It's not going to be affected by the weather. It is just that one pure constant that I know I can rely on, I can trust, and keeps me going forward and keeps me ultimately positive.
So you're almost saying, like you say, you're almost tapped into, is that through the meditation you've been taught? that side of things.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So meditating within ourselves, you learn to understand yourself a little bit better. You know yourself better, and you can guide yourself through these moments of difficulty.
Yeah.
They will always arise. This
Yeah.
is life, but it keeps you going.
Yeah.
And sorry, Akshay, same question to you. Does that?
No, I think
What sort of experiences have helped you?
It's been similar for me, and you know, I come from Delhi, India, and our family, you know, especially on my mother's side, have been following Manav Dharam for almost 70 years now.
Wow.
So throughout generations,
Yeah.
right from my mother's grandmother. So it almost like it runs in the family.
Yeah.
Grown up with it.
Grown up with it,
Yeah.
and not so much only grown up with it, but what I see is that my own personal experiences has made me believe that this is something which is very important. And I am 37, 38 years of age, but I was initiated into spirituality formally. I mean, I've been listening to satsangs and going on to congregations, ever since I was a child. I mean, ever since I could remember, to be honest. But I was initiated into knowledge way back in 2002. So when I was very young, I think it's almost 16 years, when I was in 16 years. And that path, that experience has become stronger. And to your question, Kavi, that how does it help you? I think it's a very personal experience, that the experiences that I have seen over the years in terms of not only, positivity or even spiritual experiences, but more on a humane level, trying to understand what does humanity mean, what does it mean to be in a world wherein some people are not at that at the same level of understanding your own feelings. Mm-hmm. So how do you deal with that? Making everybody aware that can I be an example of that spirituality? So almost like telling people that I am who I am, and if you like me, that there's a reason behind that, because I may be a good person to somebody, and the reason I attribute is always to the fact that I've been in touch with spirituality. I've been knowing myself in that sense. So that those are the personal experiences that I have undergone.
And I'm assuming, this is very assumption here, but 70 years that your family have been following Manav Dharam, I'm assuming you would have seen that sort of positivity within your household.
Yes.
Through that, right? Because again, speaking to my own experiences, very similar to what Darsha said earlier. We've had scenarios where things have been bad within the family or whatever. We've had people pass away at a young age. But always and always it comes back to family coming together, being positive throughout, because the next day is only going to get better and better and better.
Absolutely.
So it's... I feel, and I'm assuming it's a similar view, that you were surrounded, that nature-nurture concept is there, because if you're surrounded yourself with that positivity, it'll surely help you up.
And that's how I see it. And I'll tell you my experiences, that a whole ecosystem around you wherein people are positive. And I call that as step number one. Because yes, there may be people around you who are very positive, but then does it really affect you in that sense? I mean, does it come to you and you are also in that zone wherein you feel positive? It could be different because, the true meaning of spirituality or understanding spirituality can only come from your own experiences.
Absolutely.
It cannot come from looking at someone and believing, yes, if that person is doing it right, so then the path is right. Because, that person might have 1,000 different experiences to you, and it could be completely different journey for yourself. Mm-hmm. So what I've been, and after I've been initiated right from 2002, I've tried to meditate. I've tried to go within inside me and try to follow the teachings of Guru Maharaji. And that's the journey that you have to live in terms of going it step by step. I mean, on day one, I cannot call myself as the Zen master. I'm still not in that zone. I mean, I'm still, taking, I would say, living through my experiences. Mm-hmm. But it always helps, especially in this age wherein we are all young. We have responsibilities. The topic for today, positivity. So it's that one of those things where you go within yourself try to analyze a lot of stuff, have those experiences, and then positivity is an outcome of those experiences, to be honest.
And like you were saying, it's such a personal experience, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's like if I sat here with a plate of food, I could describe the food to you. I could say, oh, it's really sweet, it's a chocolate cake, it's got fudge icing on it, you know, but until you taste it for yourself, me describing it, you are not going to be able to have the same experience that I'm having eating it. And I think that's where, you know, a lot of, when we look at religion in the traditional sense, if you look at the scriptures that all religions have written, it's prophets or, you know, divine souls who have tried to explain their personal experiences and impart that to everybody else around them, because they have experienced something so positive. They want to, as many people as possible to know. And this is the same knowledge that Guru Maharaj is spreading, that has been passed on, you know, thousands and thousands of years ago. It's nothing new, nothing changes, and it will continue to do so, you know, in hundreds of years to come.
I just want to pull up on a point you were speaking about earlier as well, and challenging world we live in, positivity, technology, all of the above.
How long have you got? We're here all day.
Because we see it all over the place. There is that sort of. I know there's sadly been lots of people who may have passed away due to different health issues, etc., which come from these advancements in technology and the sort of spotlight on people and not being able to probably stay positive in those scenarios. How do you guys cope, for example? Do you find there's an impact with the technology side of things with your children?
Oh, absolutely.
Just stay positive.
Absolutely. Okay. I don't feel positive at the end of the day after I've said to them 20 times, please can you put your phones away because you've been on it for an hour. But no, they're not that bad actually. They're really good. But I think there's a definite challenge for parents these days, particularly with youngsters, where...
Compared to when you were growing up?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I wouldn't want to be a teenager in this modern day of technology. You know, I come from an era where we used to play out on the streets and, you know, we'd come back home at the end of the day and then our parents would say, oh, hi, have you had a nice day? You know, we can't do that anymore. Yeah. We live in a very, very different world. And I am concerned. However, I don't think banning everything is the answer. We've got to find a way to live with all of this. Gain the benefits from it that we can, while equally protecting ourselves and our, you know, the younger generation from any negative impact, because I think there is a lot of negativity on there, me personally. How we do that, I think, is constantly changing, but it's definitely a challenge. But in terms of positivity, I think there are nice things that you can look at as well.
Yeah, definitely.
I find that we are fed a lot of negativity, and certainly if you're constantly looking at the news, there's an awful lot of negativity.
Yeah.
I visit, through work, I visit a lot of people at home, and these are people who aren't able to leave the house. So my experience is that those who have a very positive mindset, they've been through all sorts of things. You know, I meet people who've been through various world wars, had very harrowing experiences, but when they have a positive outlook on life, their conversation with you is still very positive. They're very grateful. They're very thankful for what they have in their life. And they want to continue teaching. They want to tell you about their experiences. Whereas I could equally meet somebody who's had a similar experience, but they have a very negative outlook on life, a very negative, the world owes me lots. And unfortunately, I find that a lot of people then seem to have a lot more other illnesses as a result of just sometimes their general well-being and outlook in life is just quite negative. So I do believe that there is some impact of that, you know, on their overall health. Those that are at home and are constantly watching the news, and I'll never forget this one lady. I remember I went to see her and she was so worried that any sound of a plane or a helicopter, she thought there was something really worrying coming because of what she was watching on the news. So I really do think we have to be mindful about what we expose ourselves to.
Yeah.
And personally, I think the answer is what you feed yourself.
Yeah. Definitely makes an impact.
And since we are on the topic of positivity, I think let me start with some experiences on the positive side of technology, right?
Sure.
So
Yeah.
Let's flip it.
I mean, the way I take it positively and how it helps me remain positive is, like I said earlier, that because my family is back home, so technology is enabling me
Yeah.
to be in constant touch with them.
Yeah.
So they're just
Yeah.
a phone call away,
Yeah.
or even better, a video call away.
Yeah,
exactly.
So both these avenues are available. So our family is like fully, in different parts of the world. So my eldest brother is in Australia. My family, my mom, dad, my elder brother and family, they are in Delhi. Of course, I am along with my wife are here. So we do make a point to connect, once every week or in 10 days, all of us together, trying to speak, trying to be as normal as possible.
Yeah.
And so that's the best way of imbibing
Yeah.
that technology, right?
Yeah.
To remain connected. But then, although I do not have kids, but I do understand because I have my nieces and nephews who are impacted by constant exposure to that. Maybe it's a tablet, it's a phone, or a laptop screen, and so those are the challenges. I think to your point, Darshana, I think that was perfectly put. That in our day and times, we used to go out, play, build friendships for life, and have that knowledge of relationships right from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And what I've seen recently is that because people are more, or not people, but young kids are more focused on their phones and everything, so that realism and so their world is what is they see on the screen.
Yeah.
It's a bit removed. I'm not saying remove. It's a strong word, and I do not think it's removed.
They're
but it's
building
just that
relationships through the phone, aren't they, rather than
so they are having difficulties in connecting to different people, and
Yeah.
it happens even in schools. And when I was back in India last time, I was able to go to in India we call it the parents teacher meeting. I don't know what we call it there in the UK, but it's more like a feedback session wherein everybody meets.
Parents' evening.
And one of the things she said that is that she's my niece, she's very good at making friends and connecting. So, and she made that point that is it because she plays around with kids a lot, or there are like so many kids at home? Because she finds that in other kids it's not so prevalent. So that is, again, I feel that yes, it needs to be done. It has to be inculcated. So on the positive side, that's how I feel it. And then on a larger level, the way I see the positive effects of technology is, again, to be connected to my spiritual side. It could be something like of the sport podcast. I can listen in my own good time, trying to imbibe the good things out of it. Or even maybe a quote or maybe a satsang, even for 10 minutes, if I listen to that from my Guru Maharaj's, channel on Manav Dharam, so that really gets me going. So there are a lot of positives, but then, there are negatives to it as well. And I think it's, again, comes back to the same point that how do you use it for your own personal good? That's the only thing.
And so I guess whilst we're talking on that sort of space you may be in, so we're talking about children, they're being in that sort of positive space, how did your sort of experience shift when you say, for example, come to the ashram, which we have in London, which is Manav Dharam Society's temple, say, and there's satsang going? Does your energy personally, does it shift when you're in a space where there's a lot more positivity around you? How does that work for you? Or is it difficult for you?
No. I strongly believe that who you surround yourself is what impacts you, and what you feed yourself as well. So just going back to what we were saying earlier, you feed yourself negative things, you are going to feel quite negative. And this is the importance of making sure that you feed yourself the correct things. So what you're reading has an impact on you.
Definitely.
What you're listening to has an impact on you. What you're experiencing generally in life is going to have an impact on you. So attending things like satsangs, what you're taking in through your ears, what you're then understanding and actioning in your life, is all for the benefit to improve your mindset and ultimately for a more positive outlook on life. So it has a massive impact, and I think regularly, for me personally, regularly attending, listening to satsangs is so incredibly helpful. Not just that, but things like podcasts. There's so many things out there now, aren't there? Reading magazines, reading books, anything that is going to reinforce positive messages, just to remove that negative mindset from your life.
Yeah, and I think it's got to do with that. In any case, even if we were not to take the example of the ashram, but generally also, and that's it. It hits the point around the families as well. That the reason you enjoy with your family is because you are all in that same zone, same way of thought, same way of living lives. So it just gives you that comfort.
Yeah.
And now coming back to the part whenever I go to ashram, the one thing that I look forward to is being amongst people who I feel are on that positive path themselves, and then try to feed off each other's energies, literally. And another point is that when you go there, you meet with different people, hear their experiences, because it's a part of the spiritual journey is just not to be within yourself, right? Your experiences grow from hearing from others too. And this is like why this podcast is a great example, wherein I get an opportunity to share my experiences, but then it is equally important that people who come next or people who have been here, try to imbibe their experiences too. For example, I was listening to a podcast recently on this channel, and one of the speakers said that they just listened to one particular line in the Maharaji satsang one day, and then it kind of changed their whole perspective. And that's what is important, that's what it gets to you. You never know. And I have seen that situation wherein I've just gone like a normal, satsang day, you have to be there, ashram. But then there's one single thing that really sticks with you.
Yeah.
And then it takes you on a different journey altogether. And that's why it's important to be there as much as possible. I know we are all busy, but try to come together, hear those, be amongst those people and try to learn from each other.
There's always a scenario whenever you go to a satsang, whenever you have something, you'll be thinking of something. There'll be something troubling you, and suddenly the speaker, if it's a Baiji, if it's Mahatma, if it's Guru Maharaji, will speak on that point. Maybe not specifically to it, but
so it appears that he's speaking to you,
exactly,
or she's speaking to you. It happens, and I've totally experienced that. So I second that completely.
And that's that goosebumps feeling that you get where it's like, this is being told to me to make sure I better myself. Exactly. Maybe you're going from that negative mindset to bring you back into that positivity, which I think is quite an amazing feeling. And
I think when you put that thought out there, you've got a question, or you're looking for the answer for something, but you want a positive outcome to it because you've put that out there into the universe. It comes to you, and it is so.
Indeed,
it's amazing. It's an amazing feeling, isn't it? And I completely get it. Yeah, you get goosebumps, don't you? But this is an experience that multiple people feel.
No, for example, I'll give you another example of how the collective good has come out of something which you never really planned. So, I think it was somewhere around 2010 or so. I was still in Delhi, of course. So we were in my organization, like professional organization, we were like planning to do something on the social side, like for society and all. And some of the ideas that were thrown around, one of those was a blood donation camp. And you won't believe that, and I think we were discussing that in the office somewhere around, late weeks, in Thursdays, Fridays, and we had a satsang program in the ashram, Delhi ashram, on the Sundays, and we were like bunch of youngsters there, and suddenly I don't know how, but the discussion just started veering towards what we can do by the youngsters. Like we had that young team at Manav Dharam, of course, and we all got together, and that plan that we were thinking about actually got executed within 2 weeks, and we organized a big blood donation camp within the ashram premises, and the benefit or the positivity was spread not only by the spiritual experience but by doing something good for the society. And we made it open for anybody to come in, and people came in, and we had, I guess, one of the record blood donation on that particular day by the youngsters from Manav Dharam Society.
Amazing.
in Delhi, and we were actually certified by Rotary organization that yes, it's such amount of so much amount of blood has been collected on one single day at one single location.
Great.
So I think that's what feeds me off while going to congregations or satsangs, that you meet there. You always meet, and then you come together and then take those ideas to execution. So, yeah.
That's amazing, and it's great to hear that. And whilst we're on that sort of still in that positivity mindset and how we cultivate it, is there anything or a teaching or a habit or something that uplifts you regularly to almost get back, say you're in a negative mindset, back into a positive mindset? Is there anything that sort of pushes you back up specifically?
So I always think of the example of a garden.
Okay.
So I, in my later years now, I'm enjoying gardening. And your mind is like a garden.
Yeah.
And any weeds that appear are like your negative thoughts. So the image I have in my mind is that you've got to regularly remove those weeds.
Yep.
The negative thoughts will come, but you've got to keep removing them.
And those weeds keep coming back.
They
that's
keep
for
coming
sure.
back, but you've got to keep removing them. And as you do, the more weeds you remove, the more the plant will flourish. And then adding on to that, you've got sunlight that's going to help the plants grow. And the picture I have in my mind is that that's the light inside of you that you experience when you meditate, that just helps you to prosper.
So that's your thought process that helps you, right?
Yeah, when you have those little negative thoughts that come in, I just have to, you talk to yourself. It's how you talk to yourself, isn't it? So I say to myself, Darshna, it's just another weed, just remove it, pull it out.
To the next one.
Go to the next one, that's it.
And so that's a very good example, and I'll take a very dumb example on the opposite end. But for me, it's around when I want to try and cultivate positivity, it's generally for me around I go and play sport. That creates that space for me to be positive, because so golf, for example, biggest thing, I really like to play golf, play a lot with my friends, but at times previously I would have been in a state where I'd constantly be comparing to those friends to say, oh no, he's playing really well, like why am I not playing as well as him, rather than concentrating on your own game and bringing that. And as soon as you switch that tack to say concentrate on yourself, understand what you're doing, and relax, as soon as you start doing that, you start to play well. As soon as you start to play well, that positivity just starts to build within you, that okay, I'm starting to get better. And that, even though it's in a totally different location, as I'm playing on a golf course, it then transpires into your personal world, because you come back in such a great mindset. You go back to work in a great mindset, and I'm sure that's what used to work for my dad, who used to go off to play golf in the middle of his work day and then go back to work post that. So this is more of a wider question for humanity, to if we take on more positivity throughout, is there going to be a change in the world, do we think?
No, absolutely. I think I always believe that an individual is not just an individual. You have a lot of power in yourself to shape things. Is that, do you have that conviction, or do you just get bogged down in your day-to-day lives, trying to manage what's happening around you? So I think that perspective is very important. That yes, you can contribute to the greater good. And once you have that, then only you can start thinking about what you can actually change or what you can actually contribute. Yeah. Because you may not end up doing anything drastic or superlative in that sense that will change the whole world around. But I think even if you make a change visible in a single person's life, that is also something very important. Mm-hmm. So believing in that, but it has to start from oneself first. Until unless you are at peace, you cannot have anybody else understand.
You can't impart the wisdom in that.
Exactly, and that goes back to the same point that I mentioned earlier, that the reason I could understand spirituality a bit better than others was because my family's values, what I've experienced through them initially, and then it came to my own experiences. So totally, I firmly believe that spirituality is very important. It takes you on that journey where you can be positive and understand the perspectives in life, because you can be as positive as yourself, but then you're also prone to mistakes. Yeah. And the negativity around you could be basis your own actions. Yeah. So, but you have to understand that, yes, live with it, try to deal with it and come back next day with a more positive outcome.
Great. And I think we've come to a natural close there, but that was great to hear from both of your thoughts around positivity. Thank you both for joining us. Thank you both for opening up. I know it's we talk on numerous different spaces and we know we jump around, but thank you for sharing all your sort of experiences and thoughts today. We look forward to having you both back on again soon.
Thanks for having us.
And thanks for coming.
Thank you again.
Cheers,
Thanks.
So, as we've heard today, spirituality is one of the key factors to being positive. Both the individuals, Akshay and Darshna, have been able to share some of their experiences, how positivity and negativity go hand in hand, but about understanding and realizing and taking it head on is quite important, and how meditation and the work that Manav Dharam is doing all together can support positivity in this world we live in. So join us next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Indian Standard Time, 12:30 p.m. UK time, and 7:30 a.m. US Eastern Time for the next episode of the Modern Day Spirituality Podcast. We look forward to seeing you then.